What most people don't realize is that the story of a lost little girl in Kate McCann's family didn't begin with Madeleine. It is a story that echoes through time. Decades earlier, her own mother, Eileen, experienced the unimaginable pain of losing a child, a grief that left an indelible mark on the family's soul. This stunning revelation unearths a deep and almost universal fear, the fear that the tragedies in our families are not random events, but repeating echoes. It's the chilling thought that the unresolved pain of our grandparents could somehow replay itself in our own lives, like an invisible script we are destined to follow. What the world has debated as a crime or a terrible accident might, in fact, be something much deeper, a family curse. Not a curse of spells and witchcraft, but a psychological pattern of loss, traveling silently from one generation to the next. Today, we are going to explore the secret held by Madeleine's grandmother, and I will show you how this story from the past is the key that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about Madeleine's disappearance. Before we analyze the suspicions in the case, please let me know where you saw this video. I will read it all and spread it around the world. And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel to be the first to receive notifications when there are new videos. To understand this inheritance, we must first look to the woman who unknowingly carried its initial weight, Eileen McCann, Kate's mother. She was described as a strong woman, the very pillar of her Irish Catholic family. But beneath that formidable strength lay a wound that never truly healed. Eileen and her husband, Brian, had other children before Kate, and one of their daughters, Pamela, was lost in a tragic way. The pain of losing a child, a sorrow so profound that science cannot measure its depths, took root in Eileen's heart and, by extension, in the heart of the entire family. This is our inciting incident, not a single event, but a persistent state of being, an unresolved grief. In families that lack the emotional tools to process such a monumental loss, the pain doesn't simply vanish, it transforms. It becomes the heavy silence at the dinner table, a nameless anxiety that hums in the background, a paralyzing fear that the tragedy could happen again. The central conflict of this story, then, is not a battle against a kidnapper. It's a battle against a ghost, the ghost of a past loss that haunts the present. Kate McCann grew up in this atmosphere, in the shadow of a sister she never knew, and a grief that was not her own, but which she inherited all the same. Modern psychology has a name for this phenomenon: transgenerational trauma. It's the concept that severe trauma can be passed down through generations, not through our genes, but through behavioral patterns, unexplained fears, and a sadness that seems to have no clear origin. Could it be that Kate, the doctor, the woman who valued control, was unknowingly carrying her mother's deepest fear, the fear of losing a daughter? And could that unconscious fear have become the hidden script of her life, simply waiting for the right moment to manifest? The crime scene, from this perspective, is not apartment 5 Amperes in Portugal. It is the family tree. With this backdrop of inherited trauma, every decision the McCanns made on their holiday takes on a new and frightening layer of meaning. The tension rises when we consider that they weren't just on a leisure trip. They were, perhaps, unconsciously staging a play to fight the ghost of their past. The first barrier to peace was an obsessive need for control, the choice of the resort, the rigid dinner routine, the insistence on maintaining the facade of a perfect holiday. To the outside world, this looked like the typical behavior of a successful, upper-middle-class family. But when viewed through the lens of transgenerational trauma, all this control can be seen as a desperate attempt to keep chaos at bay. The thinking might be, if everything is perfectly planned, if all the rules are followed, then tragedy cannot strike again. It's a form of bargaining with fate. The problem is that the very routine they created, one of collective negligence, was the embodiment of chaos disguised as order. The second barrier was an invisible family loyalty. The psychologist Anne Anselin Schutzenberger studied how, out of a blind and unconscious love, descendants sometimes try to heal their ancestors by repeating their fates. Is it possible that Kate, by becoming a mother to a little girl, Madeleine, had unconsciously taken on the mission to fix her own mother's pain? And how would she do that? By being the perfect mother, having the perfect family, proving that this time the daughter would be safe. But this immense pressure to be perfect, to rewrite the family history, may have created an anxiety so profound that it led her to make decisions that, from the outside, seem inexplicable. And here, the story gives us a dark clue, an omen. The negligence of leaving the children alone was not a one-time act. It was a nightly pattern. As the psychologist Carl Jung warned, what you resist persists. They resisted acknowledging the risk, and so the danger persisted. It's as if the pattern of trauma was testing the limits, pushing the family ever closer to the abyss, waiting for its chance to repeat itself. With every night that passed without incident, their illusion of control grew stronger, and the echo of the old tragedy grew a little louder, though no one was listening. The point of no return arrives on the night of May 3rd. It's the moment the echo becomes a scream. Madeleine's disappearance is no longer a threat, an anxiety, a ghost. It is the literal, concrete, and brutal repetition of the family's original trauma. The pattern has tragically completed its circle. The grandmother's pain is now the mother's pain. The very fate that Kate may have spent her entire life unconsciously trying to avoid has found her. From this moment on, the story changes forever. The trauma is no longer a family secret whispered through time. It explodes into one of the biggest media spectacles of the century. And Kate and Jerry's reaction to this explosion is what defines the rest of their lives. Instead of turning inward to ask the devastating question, how could this happen again in our family? They are forced to turn outward. The search for Madeleine becomes the only possible narrative. From a trauma-informed perspective, this relentless public search, which the world sees as an act of love and hope, can be viewed as something more complex, an escape from the unbearable pain of looking in the mirror and seeing her own mother's reflection, an escape from the terrifying question, did I somehow cause this? Was I destined for this? By focusing on an external kidnapper, they avoid having to confront the internal ghost. The search for Madeleine becomes the mission that prevents them from undertaking the real search, the search for the roots of pain within their own lineage. They can no longer go back to being the family they were. They are now the public embodiment of their own family curse, condemned to perform their grief on a global stage, perhaps without ever fully understanding the script they were following. The question that lingers, the hook that pulls us into the depths of this mystery, is this. If trauma can be inherited, can the way we cope with it be inherited too? What does the grandmother's unresolved grief teach us about Kate and Jerry's controversial reactions? The turning point of this story isn't found in a piece of evidence, but in a pattern, the pattern of reacting to trauma. To understand Kate and Jerry's behavior, which so many judged as cold or strange, we may need to look not at them, but at the generation before. How did their grandmother, Eileen, cope with the loss of her daughter? The Irish Catholic culture of that era, and British culture in general, preached resilience through silence. Pain was something to be endured with dignity, not displayed for the world to see. Grief was a private cross to bear, almost a taboo. Eileen learned to be strong, to not fall apart, to carry her pain inside. And this survival mechanism, this way of processing grief, became part of the family's emotional software. Kate didn't just learn to walk and talk from her mother. She may have unconsciously learned how to grieve. Kate McCann's behavior in the aftermath of Madeleine's disappearance is a mirror of her mother's. The same apparent strength, the same refusal to surrender to public despair, the same controlled dignity. What the world interpreted as coldness and a lack of emotion may have been, in fact, the deepest and most tragic form of loyalty. A daughter grieving in precisely the way her mother had taught her. Kate was unknowingly performing a script handed down by her mother. She was grieving in the only way her family's emotional software knew how, silently, inwardly. You see, the true curse isn't just the repetition of the tragedy itself. It is the repetition of the reaction to the tragedy, the same pattern of silent grief, of pain turned inward. And this is a change that alters everything, because by repeating her mother's pattern, Kate ensured that this new trauma, once again, would not be fully processed, not be healed. She encapsulated it, turning it into a search a campaign, a foundation. But the primal scream of loss, the raw breakdown the world seemed to expect, was perhaps never allowed to surface. The ghost of her grandmother's unresolved grief didn't just claim another daughter from the family line. It ensured that the new pain would be managed exactly like the old one, with a dignified silence that leaves a wound that never closes. You know, there's a concept in trauma psychology that is absolutely haunting. The idea that what is not resolved will be repeated. A family trauma is like a scream let out in a deep cave. The first generation hears the full, piercing sound. The second, like Kate's generation, hears only the fading echo. And the third, like Madeleine, who heard nothing at all, feels only the strange vibration in the walls, a nameless anxiety, a sense of danger whose source she can't identify. The curse is living with the vibration of a scream you never heard. This gives us an entirely new lens through which to view the decision-making that night. The choice to leave the children alone, which seems so inexplicable for such intelligent and controlling parents, can be understood differently now. Could the unresolved trauma of loss, inherited from her mother and grandmother, have created a profound blind spot in Kate? A fear so deep that something could happen to her children that she had to deny any possibility of risk. It's a tragic paradox. The extreme fear of loss may have led directly to a behavior that made the loss possible. It's like being so terrified of heights that you refuse to look down while walking along the edge of a cliff. And now, modern science is beginning to offer clues as to how this is physically possible. The fascinating field of epigenetics suggests that extreme trauma can leave chemical marks on our DNA, like little switches that are flipped on or off. These marks don't change our genes, but they can alter how our genes are expressed, and incredibly, they can be passed down to subsequent generations. This means that the granddaughter of a woman who lived through a famine might be born with a metabolism more prone to storing fat. And the granddaughter of a woman who lived through a traumatic loss might be born with a nervous system that is more reactive to stress, more prone to anxiety. The curse might not just be a story we tell. It might be something we carry in our very cells. With this understanding, the story becomes even more tragic. It's no longer about judging an act of negligence. It's about witnessing the journey of a woman who may have been a prisoner of her own biology and family history, fighting against a fate that was already written in her unconscious. The question that remains, then, is almost unbearable. If we are sometimes fated to repeat these patterns, is there any way to break the chain? The resolution to this mystery, therefore, isn't about finding a culprit. It's about recognizing a pattern. The central conflict was never Kate McCann versus a kidnapper, but Kate McCann versus the ghost of her own family history. The answer to the question, why did this happen, lies not in the events of that single night, but in the echo of pain that traveled through generations. Kate McCann's story becomes that of a classic tragic hero, a woman who, in a desperate attempt to flee her destiny, the inherited fear of losing a daughter ran straight into its arms. Remember the anchor we started with? Jung's phrase that what is not made conscious becomes fate. The grandmother's unprocessed grief, the mother's silent pain, all of it became the unconscious script that directed Kate's life. The negligence, the need for control, the seemingly cold reaction to trauma, none of it has to be seen as malice. It can all be seen as a symptom. Symptoms of an ancestral wound that finally found a way to manifest. The resolution, then, is that the curse was not an external force, but an internal programming. And Madeleine's disappearance was not the beginning of the tragedy. It was the tragic end of a story that began decades before. Real peace for this family might only be found on the day they stop looking forward, searching for a kidnapper, and find the courage to look back into the mirror of their past and heal the original wound. In the end, what does the story of the McCann family curse teach us? The great lesson, the core idea that emerges from this journey into the past, is that we are so much more than our individual choices. We are walking libraries, carrying the stories, the secrets, and the unresolved pains of those who came before us. We believe our fears and anxieties are uniquely our own, but so often, we are just the echo of a scream that was let out in another generation. And this makes me think, in a profound and slightly unsettling way, about our own lives. What are the silent patterns in our own families? The pattern of addiction that seems to repeat itself, the financial hardship that seems to stalk a bloodline, the anxiety that passes from mother to daughter, like an unwanted inheritance. The McCann case gives us a powerful tool, the courage to become archaeologists of our own history, the courage to ask our parents and grandparents about their pain, their secrets, their losses. Because the only way to break a curse that isn't magical but psychological is by bringing it into the light of consciousness. You have to name the ghost for it to stop haunting you. And perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay to Madeleine is to use her story as a map, not to find her, but to find ourselves. My final opinion, after diving into this ancestral story, is that blaming Kate McCann for her mistakes is like blaming a branch for growing crooked without ever looking at the tree it came from. What we have seen here is not the story of a bad mother, but perhaps one of the most tragic victims of an invisible family loyalty. She may have been the carrier of a pain that was not hers, the executor of a script she did not write. And the real curse is not the repetition of tragedy. It is the inability to recognize the pattern. It is to keep searching for a monster out there when the real ghost has always been inside the family's own story, waiting to be named, to be seen, and to be healed. And now, after unearthing this secret, I really want to know what this story has awakened in you. Can you think of a pattern, a fear, or a sadness in your family that seems to have no clear origin? You can share your reflections in the comments. You don't have to give details, just a thought on how the past reverberates in the present. I will read every one, because it is by sharing these insights that we begin to break these invisible chains. Remember the saying, what the son wishes to forget, the grandson wishes to remember. For those who felt the chill of this revelation and want to continue deciphering the hidden codes that govern us, our next meeting is already set. We are going to investigate the story of the Hemingway family, and the question we will answer is, why did a pattern of self-destruction repeat itself for 4 generations? Is it genetics, or is it a trauma that became a family tradition? If you believe that understanding the past is the only way to free the future, subscribe to the channel. Be a part of this archaeology of the soul. And for those who feel that this work is more than just storytelling, that it is a form of healing, the super chat is our signal. It's the way of saying, keep bringing what's in the basement to light. Every contribution is what allows us to deepen this research and share these tools of understanding with more people. It's the gesture that transforms this channel into a community of seekers. In the end, my role is not to be a judge. It is only to hold the lantern so that you can look into the darkness. Thanks for watching. How do you feel about these arguments and theories? Does it give you a different perspective on the case? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the latest notifications.